Honor and the biggest privilege to be here this week. I feel so lucky and so blessed to have been here to experience it and to speak with the veterans. To me, that is the most important thing, and they should be at the centre of everything that we do and everything that we talk about this week, because they are the men that are here. And there's not many of them left, but Evan Andrew, there are 23 who've managed to make that journey over to Normandy this week. And I managed to speak to one yesterday, Ronald Hendry, which has been the highlight of my week so far. Not only is he from Essex, I'm also from Essex, so we had a nice chat about that. But he spoke about his role here on D-Day as an 18-year-old boy from Essex. You can't even imagine. He describes floating on a landing craft for over 24 hours in the English Channel, and he describes that in the Navy at the time there was not really any comms, so nobody was told what was going on. He just sat there cramped, not really sure what was happening. And we know that D-Day was delayed, wasn't it, from the 5th of June 1944 to the 6th of June 1944 because of poor weather. And I asked him, sitting there in that landing craft, waiting to storm these beaches here on Normandy, whether he was scared. And he said no, he didn't have time to be scared. He doesn't recall being scared at all. He said he had a job to do and he just wanted to get that job done. And there's something so incredible about that generation that I'm not sure exists in generations that have come since, and it is that sense of duty and potentially laying down your life in the line of duty like these great men did. So it was so striking listening to Ronald Hendry this week. I'm not sure if we can share the clip with you, if Gallery could let me know if that's something that we do have. But it really was so emotional listening to him, and it was only at the end when I called him a hero that he started to cry, and he said he's not a hero. We were filming this in Bayeux War Cemetery, which is the largest Commonwealth war grave cemetery in France, and he looked over at the graves, and I'm sure if you've been, this is something that you can relate to. That's overwhelming sense of grief, really, just looking at the rows and rows of white headstones. And he said, I'm not a hero. The boys in the ground are the heroes, the boys that never came home. And that's so striking. They're so humble, the veterans that do remain. They don't see themselves as the heroes, they see themselves as the men that came home. But we all know that even those that came home, they never returned the same, did they? And everyone that served here on D-Day paid a price.
Ellie, before we bring in Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent, meeting those men, I've met a few of them in my time, it's an incredibly humbling experience, isn't it?
It is the most humbling experience. I was so honoured to meet Ronald, and I gave him a big squeeze after our interview. Both of us shed a tear after our conversation, and they are just the most wonderful of people, aren't they? They are dutiful, they are humble, they don't think what they did here was extraordinary. They would just describe themselves as ordinary, but we know the truth and we know what happened here. You can't even imagine it now, can you? An 18-year-old in today's world storming a beach in Normandy and making it 6 miles inland against an offence by the Germans. You couldn't even imagine what was going through those boys' minds, but they just saw it as a duty, a job to be done, and they knew that they had to do this for the greater good. They had to do it for the liberation of France and for the liberation of Europe. And this was the day that changed history. It was the day that changed the course of the Second World War. Just 11 months after this day would be victory for the Allies, and so much of that is down to the bravery of the Allied forces on the 6th of June 1944.
All right, that's Ellie. We'll be back with Ellie in Normandy shortly. Cameron Walker is with us, our royal editor. Cameron, fantastic to see the King effectively leading the world in these commemorations. The King who, his first foreign trip since his diagnosis of cancer, but was determined to be there, come what may.
Yeah, he absolutely was. And of course, the royal family have an incredibly important relationship with the royal family. It was the King's grandfather, George VI, who was the monarch during World War II. And the King spoke yesterday about how his grandfather was incredibly frustrated that he couldn't get across to Normandy on D-Day itself and had to wait kind of 10 days. No, he wouldn't
let him.
Far too dangerous. Similar to Winston Churchill, far too dangerous for him to get there as well. But we have seen the King arrive at the Royal British Legion commemorative event in Normandy this morning. He is wearing his military uniform. I'll try and get some more details as to exactly what he's wearing later on. It's unclear at the moment, but he's patron of the Royal British Legion and a number of other charities. But I think what was really lovely was as he passed the veterans, many of which are in wheelchairs, they were all really kind of determined to get out of their wheelchairs and stand up for their king. And I think that both Charles and Camilla were particularly touched by that. And you see the Queen on a number of the front pages this morning in tears at the event I was at in Portsmouth yesterday.
Because her own family have a history in the armed forces.
Yeah, they absolutely do. Her father, Major Shan, served during World War II in Egypt. He was very badly injured in World War II. So she comes from a military family, so she really gets it. She gets the sacrifice that these veterans have made. She gets the hardship that they've gone through and what they have to live with post-events. And for all these veterans who have made the journey across from the United Kingdom to Normandy, retracing their steps from 80 years ago, and they were just, as Ellie was saying earlier, just 18, 19 years old, and having to fight on the beaches of Normandy, it's just, I think it really resonates perhaps with the royal family.
We know some of them were much younger, Cameron. They lied about their age because they were so keen to be conscripted for king and country. Some of them were just 16. It's unbelievable, isn't it? We're debating in this country whether 16-year-olds could even have the vote. And there they were on those landing craft going to fight for king and country to liberate Europe from the Germans.
Absolutely. And when I was at school learning about World War II, you look at the archive footage of these soldiers and they all look so much older than yourself.
Yeah.
But now I kind of look and they're so much younger than myself. And I think it's incredible that they're all, as Ellie and reporters in Normandy have been saying, of just how young they were. We just see pictures here of the Prince of Wales. He is arriving at the Canadian commemorative ceremony. These are live pictures you're seeing on television. It's at the Juno Beach Centre.
And that's important, Cameron, because, of course, it's the royal family of Canada too. I mean, we forget that. It's Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and they all had a significant part in D-Day.
Yeah,
is that Justin Trudeau? Is that the...
It is Justin Trudeau. We also have the Prime Minister of France, Prime Minister Attal, attending this Canadian event as well, because 12 separate countries took part in the Allied invasion of France. But, of course, Commonwealth played a huge part in that, Canada especially, on Juno Beach, a number of sacrifices there. And I think it is very important for Prince William in particular, as future king, honouring the sacrifices that Canadian troops made 80 years ago. His Royal Highness is expected to deliver a speech, meet cadets and the youth cadets of Canada. Of course, he, Prince William, will be head of the armed forces one day, including the armed forces, of course, of Canada. So I think it's perhaps fitting that he's chosen to join the Canadian Memorial Service rather than joining his father and Queen Camilla at the Royal British Legion UK service. Of course, they're spreading out.
Like most royals, he's had his own time in the armed forces.
Yeah, he did. He's an RAF veteran himself. He was an RAF search and rescue helicopter pilot, and of course he's also a colonel of a number of the regiments. He took over recently from his father as well for one of them. He's wearing his military medals there. I suspect they are the Golden Jubilee, Platinum Jubilee, Diamond Jubilee and the Coronation Medal that His Royal Highness has on.
We're waiting to watch a fly past, I believe, at the moment, Cameron. But what else is going to happen today? What's the agenda for the royals today?
So the Prince of Wales here is going to be delivering a speech and laying a wreath at the Canadian commemorative ceremony. Following that, the Prince of Wales again is going to be representing his father, the King, at the ceremony, the international commemorative ceremony at Omaha Beach, which has heavy losses. President Joe Biden is expected to attend, along with a number of other heads of state. President Emmanuel Macron, I believe, is also going to be there. But this is significant because this goes back to the point about the King's health, actually, because it would have been His Majesty the King representing the United Kingdom as head of state at the international commemorative ceremony later. But on doctors' advice, they have basically advised him not to take part in that.
Is it because it would take so long and he'll be on his feet?
Quite possibly. They haven't gone into details, but we know, of course, that he's at the Royal British Legion event this morning. He was at the Portsmouth event yesterday. They're obviously trying to pace him, and each individual engagement is decided on a case-by-case basis. And it appears that his doctors just thought that would be one too far. But of course, I think this is possibly the first time since the cancer diagnosis where we have seen the Prince of Wales actually replace or represent his father at an official event.
Feels a little like a baton handover in a way. It's such a global event on the world stage. It's almost like an easing William into the
and of course
role.
we saw that with the King and the late Queen. Yeah. Stepping in more and more to take because of her failing health.
We absolutely did, but I think the King himself would have been incredibly frustrated that he couldn't go, and I'm sure if the doctors gave the green light, he absolutely would be determined to go.
But Cameron, it's important he listens to the doctors. We want our King around for a lot longer, and you've got to do as the doctor tells you. He's not getting any younger either. No,
he's certainly not, but he'll be happy to meet as many veterans as he can.
And this is a big moment for Queen Camilla.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think we just saw yesterday the emotion that Queen Camilla went through meeting the veterans. She's obviously going to be meeting a number of others today. She's accompanying her husband, the King, who clearly is undergoing cancer treatment. And I think this is Queen Camilla on the world stage as well, surrounded by veterans, surrounded by serving armed forces personnel from a number of countries, both the United Kingdom, the Commonwealth and the world. Live pictures there, you just see Prince William, Prime Minister Trudeau and Prime Minister Attell going up to the Canadian memorial service. This is hosted by the Canadian government, actually, so this is nothing to do with Ministry of Defence or the British government. This is purely a Canadian event, but clearly Prince of Wales is future King of Canada, so that's why he is so heavily involved.
There's not going to be an event quite like this, you know, because the 90th anniversary, God help us, none of those veterans will still be with us.
No, and
it's so poignant, so historic, this moment.
This one last hurrah.
We're going to be bringing you pictures live from this beautiful morning there this morning. Stay with us until midday, though. Let's get the very latest news with Sophia Wensler here.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 3 minutes past 10. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. And as you've been hearing, senior members of the royal family and world leaders are gathering with veterans in Normandy to mark the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings. On the 6th of June 1944, tens of thousands of British and Allied soldiers landed on 5 beaches in northern France to push back German forces. The King and Queen have been paying tribute to fallen soldiers at the UK's national commemoration event at the British Normandy Memorial in Vers-sur-Mer. They were joined by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron. Meanwhile, Prince William has arrived at Juno Beach for the Canadian commemoration service. In the UK, D-Day commemorations are also underway across the country. In Lisbon, in Northern Ireland, the town crier delivered a D-Day proclamation. A flotilla of boats will leave Cornwall, where thousands of troops departed to take part in the invasion, while a beacon lighting ceremony will take place in Kent. The Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh will join veterans at a Royal British Legion Remembrance Service in Staffordshire, and the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester will meet veterans at a show at the Royal Albert Hall in London. And the Prime Minister has pledged to boost veteran benefits in an election offering. Rishi Sunak says he wants to make the UK the best place in the world to have served in the armed forces. The policy pledge on the 80th anniversary of D-Day includes reducing the price of veterans' rail cards from £30 per year to £21 and extending the existing national insurance relief for employers who hire ex-military members. Labour claims the Tory record on veterans is shameful and their election plans mean no change. But Secretary of State for Work and Pensions Mel Stride says it's an important step forward.
We are to be re-elected, and there we'll be looking at further plans and strategic plans that there will be a duty on ministers to come forward with. We're going to be decreasing the cost of the rail card to veterans from £30 to £21. We're going to be extending the national insurance reductions that are available to employers that recruit veterans, for example, where we know we have higher employment rates amongst veterans than we do across the population more generally. generally. So we stand full square with them, and I think this is an important step forward.
But Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey says Labour would go further for veterans.
Unfortunately, the government's created over 14 years a postcode lottery on help for veterans. They've halved the support on employment, and they've allowed veterans' homelessness to rise over the last year, not end it. And there's much more that can be done and needs to be done. We would start by putting fully into law the Armed Forces Covenant. Now, that would reinforce and strengthen the rights of veterans to services and also of service personnel and their families. We'd also legislate in the first year of a Labour government for a new independent Armed Forces Commissioner.
First Minister of Wales, Vaughan Gething, has insisted he's not going to resign after losing a vote of no confidence. He wiped away tears as colleagues spoke to defend him in the Welsh Parliament earlier, but he still went on to lose a no confidence vote. It follows criticism over accusations of accepting donations from convicted criminals and misleading the COVID inquiry over deleted messages. He's called the defeat a desperate gimmick by the Conservatives, but promised he won't be stepping down. And in other news, a rescue operation is underway in the English Channel, with reports of up to 80 migrants in the water. British and French vessels have raced to the scene about halfway across the channel between Calais and Dover. GB News has been told that as many as 250 migrants are currently in boats on the French side of the channel this morning and attempting to cross to the UK. And an Israeli airstrike on a UN school in central Gaza has killed at least 27 people, according to local officials. Ambulances and rescue teams have been rushing to the wounded and dead to a nearby hospital. The Israeli military said it carried out a strike on a UN school that housed Hamas compound and that 20 to 30 fighters were inside. The Hamas media office has rejected the claim, accusing Israel of committing a horrific massacre. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
It is 10:08 on this historic day. It's the 80th anniversary of D-Day. You're with Britain's Newsroom with GB News with Andrew Pearson and Bev Turner. We are in France, of course, where thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of British troops joined Allied nations storming the beaches of Normandy.
D-Day opened the long-awaited second front, of course, helping to liberate France from Nazi rule. So joining us now is our presenter, Ellie. Well, Ellie has been working incredibly hard over in Normandy. We're going to give Ellie a few more minutes off while Cameron stays with us now here. I mean, this isn't just a commemoration, is it, of the history, Cameron? It's very much a royal event.
Yeah, it absolutely is, because as we said earlier, the King, and by extension the royal family, has an incredibly important relationship with the armed forces. The King is Colonel-in-Chief, the head of the armed forces, so he knows the sacrifices that these people make. And his grandfather, of course, was monarch during World War II, and he spoke of his grandfather's frustration that he couldn't go across to Normandy on D-Day itself because it was far too dangerous. The British government wouldn't let him. Similarly with Churchill as well. But what he would have done is heard the stories from his grandfather and also his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, of wartime. And I think the King,
because she drove ambulances during the war.
She did.
She was in the women's voluntary service, and she was with her sister drove ambulances.
Yeah, women's auxiliary service.
Yeah.
Yes, she did. So he would have known all of that. And I think we saw a couple of days ago the King invited 4 D-Day veterans to Buckingham Palace with the Queen, and they showed him their memories and little mementos. One of them had a pair of lucky football boots that he tied to his backpack as he stormed the beaches to try and keep him alive, and he was very lucky and did. Another one had his dog tag, which still had blood stains on. When he was shot in the lung on D-Day, he was saved by his friends that day. His friend was killed the following day.
Amazing.
So the King and the Queen heard all these harrowing stories. And I think with all of that in mind, when we saw them yesterday in Portsmouth, I think the emotion perhaps overwhelmed the Queen, as we've seen on the front pages this morning. The King looked visibly moved as well. He gave a very heartfelt speech. But today, of course, is actually in Normandy on D-Day. It's a very formal event. The King is sat next to President Emmanuel Macron of France at the Royal British Legion's commemorative event. He's patron of the Royal British Legion and the Normandy Memorial excuse me, Memorial Trust. The Queen is also there. If you're watching on television, you're seeing live pictures of the Prime Minister of Canada, Trudeau, as well as the Prime Minister of France as well. And you can just see behind Trudeau there, Prince William as well, greeting Canadian D-Day veterans, because of course 12 countries around the world fought for the Allies during World War II on D-Day. Canada, as a Commonwealth country, incredibly important factor in that, on Juno Beach and specifically, and this is where the commemorative event is taking place, because Prince William, of course, future King of not only the United Kingdom, but also Canada, so it will be very important for him to meet the veterans of D-Day, yes, but also the young cadets who are helping out this event.
And the King and the Queen during the war, Cameron, were incredibly important part of it, because there was a suggestion that the Queen and her children, which had been Princess Margaret and the future Queen, should be moved to Canada, to live in Canada during the war to protect them. And she said, I go where my husband goes. So she stayed in Britain. They stayed in Buckingham Palace. Buckingham Palace took bombs during the Blitz. There was the famous moment when she went to the East End and said, I can now look you in the eye, because the palace had taken bombs too. And the King's broadcasts, and we all know from the King's speech, that very moving film, that he struggled with those broadcasts, but they were incredibly important to keep the British morale going.
They absolutely were, and the King did eventually go and visit the Normandy beaches around 10 days after D-Day, but also he was used, according to a documentary which has come out recently, the King was used by the British government to try and deceive the Germans into thinking that the D-Day landings wouldn't be happening in Normandy at all, but instead they'd happen in Calais or Scandinavia. So the King was sent to the southeast of England to visit British troops to try and trick the Germans into thinking it was going to land in Calais, drawing Germans away from Normandy to give perhaps them a bit more of a clear run on D-Day itself. And ultimately, it was successful, that invasion and the Battle of Normandy.
OK, thank you, Cameron. Of course, commemorations aren't just happening in Normandy. Let's cross to our reporter, Anna Riley, who is in wonderful Scunthorpe. Anna.
Good morning to you both. Yes, we're here in Church Square in Scunthorpe, where cadets have gathered, armed forces personnel, members of the council, including the mayor, and also veterans. I'm joined by a veteran this morning, Jim Newcomb. He served in Hong Kong. He was in the artillery for 9 years. He came out of service in 1971. Jim, thanks for joining us this morning. What does this poignant day, 80 years on from the D-Day landings, mean to you?
Means a lot to me, even though I was only one, coming up to one, when the landing took place. But you've got to remember the people that died, the people that gave their lives for us, for the way we are today. We don't want no more wars where people are dying unnecessarily. It is bloody stupid what people are doing. Like Ukraine, Putin, he's just like another Hitler. He wants to take over the world, and he can't, because there's too many of us.
And why do you think it is so important to remember? We've got 100 cadets that will be here on parade anytime soon. What is that message of passing it on to the next generation? Because we know here in this area, sadly, there's no D-Day veterans left that can come to this commemoration.
No, there isn't. There isn't. In fact, the youngest bloke to die at Normandy was 14. And that was verified by BBC, because it was on the news this morning. And I've been to Australia, and I've seen the war memorial in Australia, where it's got the names of everybody that was killed in the Second World War and the First World War, and they're done in alphabetical order, except for one. He's down, and he was 14 when he died. 14-year-old Australian soldier. That would be in Gallipoli in the First World War. and we remember them for what they've done for us. But if we didn't have this in to remember us, who would remember us? Or who would remember them? That's the main thing. Who would remember them? As they say, for your tomorrow, we give ours today. And that's it. And that's all I can say about it. All the young people that's watching as well don't have to join the forces. If you want to join a regiment, join the engineers or REME and get a trade. And you get to know everything then that goes on.
Thank you so much, Jim. Thank you for speaking to us this morning. So that parade due to start any time now here in Scunthorpe with the flag raising. It's the Armed Forces Day flag that's going to be raised ahead of commemorations here on the 22nd of June for Armed Forces today. But today very much about commemorating 80 years on from those D-Day landings on June the 6th, 1944.
Anna Riley there in Scunthorpe with some words of wisdom. Now we're joined in the studio by Kevin Maguire's here with us. What a joy. Morning, how are you?
Are you two going to have a scrap this week like you did last week?
Yeah, we know.
You can disagree, disagreeably.
I like people who will say it as it is, as you know.
Exactly.
We're just reflecting on D-Day, Kevin. We can't have you here without some thoughts.
And even though you can't stand the Royals, this is when they come into their own.
Sorry to interrupt you, Kevin.
Right.
Flyovers happening. Here we go.
L'avion que vous voyez arriver est un avion de transport Hercule.
So this is the flyover, much long awaited. No Spitfires. I think they couldn't use Spitfires, sadly, but this is all to mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day. If you're listening on the radio.
Cameron.
Yeah, the Battle of Britain Memorial flights unfortunately cannot happen at the moment because it's grounded because of, unfortunately, the Spitfire crash we had last weekend, and the pilot unfortunately lost his life in that. So as they're investigating Battle of Britain Memorial flight...
Is this going over the monument in Staffordshire?
I'm afraid I do not have those details. To try and get somebody who does, I believe so. But there'll be a number of aircraft taking part.
Yeah. And appropriate because so many planes were involved in the D-Day landings.
Absolutely.
I remember speaking just a couple of weeks ago to one of the D-Day boys who flew in by parachute and saying to him, were you scared? And he said, he was 19, he said, I was too young and too stupid to be scared.
Yeah, there were 18,000 paratroopers and 11,000 aircraft that took part on D-Day itself.
Extraordinary.
Absolutely.
I mean, parachuting into, machine gun fire, unexploded bombs, mines on the beach, fraught for the parachutists, as with everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were, unfortunately, more than 4,400 Allied deaths on D-Day itself.
Amazing.
73,000 killed in the subsequent Battle of Normandy as well. That's Allied deaths, and 153,000 wounded.
We've got Kevin Maguire here, who is, as you know, an old Republican curmudgeon. But this is when the royal family, Kevin, comes into its own. The King, of course, is Commander-in-Chief of our military.
Andrew, they do a good job on this occasion, but it's not really about them. It's the veterans. And you watch them and you just feel humble. You feel a pride. And also you get teary.
Yeah,
because you know their ranks are being thinned. I remember the end of the First World War generation.
Yeah.
And we will see at some point the end of these veterans, very sadly, and we must never forget them. We must keep commemorating them, and we've got to treat veterans better as a society because there are so many in poverty. There are so many people come out of the armed forces who end up in prison or living on the streets.
I know, and if you go to the United States, they have a veterans department. They have a Minister for Veterans. We do have a Veterans Minister, Johnny Mercer, but he's not paid, which tells you a lot, actually. It shows how serious and significant it is. It's just an add-on, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think there's been a Veterans Act since 2010.
No.
Labour, when they were in power, have questions to answer too about their treatment. And for instance, Johnny Mercer, the Veterans Minister, raised the fact that when you went to vote, you couldn't, if you were a veteran and you had a veteran ID card, it wasn't accepted as legitimate authority.
Yeah.
It's just wrong.
Our inbox this morning, Kevin, is full of a lot of people, and these pictures today are really making people think about what has really changed since World War II. Some people pulling together the issue of illegal migration today, the significance of the Channel, and whether we fought for our borders and people feel the borders are porous. There's all sorts of, and also whether the younger generation would go out and do this for the leaders today, and even should they go out and do this for leaders today, should we be dragged into war. What does it make you reflect upon in terms of these bigger issues of 2024?
If I just take those two bits, one by one, I think it's insulting on D-Day when you're seeing those veterans who risked their lives to liberate Europe from Nazis, to then talk about people coming on small boats and somehow Britain isn't defending. I'm sorry, it's a completely different scale. There was an issue on migration, legal and illegal, but this isn't the moment to raise it. And secondly, the younger generation, if they were called up, I think they would go. And of course, we're looking at those veterans. They were having ordinary lives and ordinary jobs, and all of a sudden they were called up and they had to fight the.
Well, a lot of them were proud
Nazis.
to. A lot of them. Some of them were 16, Kevin, and were too young to sign up, but wanted to. But don't you think it's different if you've got a threat to your shores? An invading force. You respond. Yeah. Different if the government wanted us to sign up to perhaps go to fight to liberate Ukraine from Russia. I think it would be more difficult.
I think totally different. I think of my own family. My mum's dad, granddad, wounded 3 times First World War, including on the Somme.
Yeah.
Her brother would have been my uncle, killed in the war, merchant navy convoy sank. Got a nephew in the RAF now. And if we all had to, we'd be too old. But of course young people would sign up if there's an existential threat. And I think just now to say young people are lazy and not interested, I think is, again, I think it's just wrong, and it's not the moment to do it.
It is hard to think, though.
You've got to celebrate the veterans on a commemoration and not go off on whatever our hobby horses are.
Well, I do think on a day like today we have to be careful with the word celebration, actually.
No,
I think that's the wrong
commemoration. No, I'm not. It's a commemoration, but I want to celebrate veterans.
Yeah.
I'm not commemorating because they're still alive.
But don't you think we have to, especially at this time when it feels like war is raging in the Middle East and also in Ukraine. I think this idea that there's a celebratory element to this, I like to sort of play that down, because we have to be mindful of the fact that we must never send our young men to war again like we did then. We must always be looking for peace in all of these conflicts around the world, and that's a conversation that I do think is important to have on a day like today.
You're absolutely right, because look, in recent years, the last 20-odd or so, I think Afghanistan and Iraq, where hundreds of British personnel were killed, many more maimed, suffered life-changing injuries physically and mentally. I think both those wars were wrong.
I agree.
And Britain shouldn't have been involved in those. So I think the Second World War was very, very, very different. I could have understood being a conscientious objector in the First World War, but not in the Second World War.
Yeah. Can we talk briefly about the general election? We watched the debate. Kevin, you and I have been watching these debates for donkey's years. When we were younger, we'd be in the spin room spinning, and now we just can't be bothered with all of that. Both Bev and I were very struck, and I had to rewind it when I was watching the debate the other night. Did he really say that? When they were asked a very simple question: if you had somebody on a waiting list, on a trolley, in a hospital, potentially very seriously ill, would you use private medicine? Rishi Sunak didn't hesitate to say yes. He said, absolutely no, Keir Starmer, made the point his wife worked for the NHS, under no circumstances. To my mind, it's when the mask slipped. I thought he's more ideological than I realised.
I think
much more left-wing and ideological.
We know Rishi Sunak uses private health.
He's a very rich man. Why shouldn't he?
And he's in charge of the NHS, so you wonder about the commitment of the NHS when you don't use the service you run. Keir Starmer is committed to the NHS. His wife works in it. The truth is, I suspect, on that question that was put to him, nobody knows until they are there. I don't have private medical care. I could have it at work, but you have to sign for it. I won't sign for it. But if one of my children or grandchildren was the only way of saving them, if that's the way you put it, would I pay? Would I not? The truth is, I don't know. I think I'd be trying to fight the system and get that care on the NHS, but I would not criticise anybody who makes a different choice. I wouldn't criticise Starmer on a life and death decision or Sunak?
So was it that was it that Sir Keir Starmer was dishonest, or was it that he would put his principles and this ideology before the life of his loved ones?
No, I think he's being honest, and he thinks he wouldn't because...
Then that's almost more terrifying, Kevin. That's more frightening.
It's not, because he wants to create an NHS that works. And when Labour left office last time, they got a lot of things wrong, but what they got right was the NHS. And they went with record low waiting lists, record high patient satisfaction. Now, unfortunately, it's absolutely on its knees. As we know, waiting lists had doubled before COVID came along, sent them to record levels. I think he's just been very, very honest. I would have answered exactly the same, but in truth, you have a hypothetical and then you have a real moment, and your hypothetical may not translate into the real moment if you're there.
I think the question, though, was to Keir Starmer, if you could have access to private healthcare and your loved one was on a waiting list, would you use it? And he said no. It was either that he couldn't think quick enough to understand the question, or as I say, he genuinely believes it, and he would put that principle before the well-being of another human being. That worries me enormously.
Would you do the same?
I've waited for appointments.
If it was life and death?
I've waited for appointments.
If it was life and death?
Well, I would be badgering the NHS. That's what I'd be.
But you can't badger. There is no one to badger.
You're coming up with a hypothetical.
It's a fair hypothetical. It happens to people all the time, Kevin.
I would resist jumping the queue.
OK, I get that.
I would feel that was wrong to other people.
If I'd been in his shoes, I'd have said, he could have said, if the Tories hadn't screwed the NHS for 14 years, he could have said that. Yeah. But he said, I'm in a position I can afford it. I would hope I can't do it, but if I had to, I would. Because that would be what most people watching and listening would say.
It was a yes or no question.
Right.
And I thought...
So you would have said no as well.
I would be very happy to watch him discuss this, as we are now.
Yeah.
And that debate, it was a yes or no.
He has been given opportunities to clarify it, though, even with our Christopher Hope here, and he still hasn't done a good job of explaining what it was that he would do in that situation. And I thought, I'm no massive Rishi Sunak fan.
He believes in the NHS.
Yeah, but so does Rishi Sunak.
But it's not that simple, is it? If your loved one, it's great. Well, that's the point. If your loved one is on a waiting list for cancer treatment, all very nice to sit there virtue signalling and say, I believe in the NHS. Well, that's not doing your grandma any good when she's sat on a gurney in a corridor.
I don't want to trigger another row, but it happens in education. Some people could... I don't want to trigger.
No, I'm happy. The parallels are very similar.
It is.
Parallels are very similar.
You could pay for privilege, or you could believe in public services.
Or you could let somebody you love die.
No, it's not that.
It is.
He is believing he can get whoever it is treated.
Well, then he either lacks imagination,
or he hasn't realised what's really happening.
Or he has no idea how bad it is in the NHS.
7.5 million people on a waiting list, Kevin.
That is the question. Look, if somebody kidnapped somebody close to you, would you pay the ransom? You might say, I can't pay the ransom.
Yes, I would.
I wouldn't sell my house.
It's not even a question.
Yeah. You've got 3 kids, it's one of your children.
Are you insured?
She wouldn't pay the ransom for me. She'd say, don't bother. Don't send him back. Don't send him back.
You're paying the kidnappers to take you. Sorry.
She probably organised it.
But honestly, and I've always used the NHS. I believe in the NHS. Yeah. But for the first time ever, Kevin, I've now taken out private healthcare for my kids because I can't get an NHS appointment. One of them had a skin condition. It was 2 weeks to see someone, and I've given up now. And part of me hates the fact, because I'm paying twice, I'm paying massive taxes, and I'm now paying private healthcare for all that. But in a sense, the only way I can reconcile that is, well, I'm taking my kids out of the already stretched system because I can afford to pay that, and so I'm taking the pressure off. It is similar to the private school education.
As long as you don't ask for a tax break.
You can't.
Do you know what?
You can't.
And this is the thing.
I'm glad you don't.
No, you can't. There were tax breaks once, but you don't get one now.
But I do think that people wouldn't mind paying more tax if it worked.
Yeah.
If it worked, and you could get your kids seen by a doctor.
That's always a legitimate point. You'll pay tax if you think you're getting something out of it.
Yeah. Right, Kevin's going to stay with us. Cameron Walker is still with us in the studio. We're going to be going back to Normandy as well to see the D-Day celebrations. First are the very latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Bev, thank you. From the GB Newsroom at 10:30, your headlines. Senior members of the royal family and world leaders are gathering with veterans in Normandy to mark the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings. On the 6th of June 1944, tens of thousands of British and Allied soldiers landed on 5 beaches in northern France to push back German forces. King Charles has praised D-Day veterans at the UK's commemoration event in Vers-le-Sur in France. The King and Queen were joined by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron. Meanwhile, Prince William has arrived at Juno Beach for the Canadian commemorative service. And in the UK, D-Day commemorations are also underway across the country. In Lisbon, in Northern Ireland, the town crier delivered a D-Day proclamation. A flotilla of boats will leave Cornwall, where thousands of troops departed to take part in the invasion, while a beacon lighting ceremony will take place in Kent. The Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh will join veterans at a Royal British Legion remembrance service in Staffordshire, and the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester will meet veterans at a show at the Royal Albert Hall in London. And the Prime Minister has pledged to boost veteran benefits in an election offering. Rishi Sunak says he wants to make the UK the best place in the world to have served in the armed forces. The policy pledge on the 80th anniversary of D-Day includes reducing the price of the Veterans' Rail Card from £30 per year to £21 and extending the existing national insurance relief for employers who hire ex-military members. Labour claims the Tory record on veterans is shameful and their election plans mean no change. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2790 and €1.1755. The price of gold is £1,847 and 67 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,264 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Leicestershire, the A511 is closed each way off junction 13 of the A42 at Ashby de la Zouch after an accident. There are long delays as you divert. On the M5 in Worcestershire, there are northbound queues towards junction 4 at Bromsgrove after an accident. In Pembrokeshire, the A40 is blocked each way by an accident by the turn for Haverfordwest Airport, causing queues. On the M1 in Bedfordshire, there are northbound queues after traffic was stopped between junctions 12 and 13 towards Bedford. In Hertfordshire, the High Street in Harpenden is closed each way after an accident in the early hours of this morning. In London, Moorgate is blocked southbound where a bus has broken down at the junction with London Wall, causing queues from Finsbury Square. On the M26 in Kent, there are queues approaching the M25 because of roadworks. On the M20 in Kent, 2 lanes are closed westbound just after junction 7 in Maidstone after an accident causing queues. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
The Princess of Wales has said she's excited by a new report on prioritising early childhood, a cause, as we know, that she's closely associated with.
Yes, the task force findings claim that the UK could reap £45.5 billion in economic benefits if firms prioritise early childhood.
Well, let's talk about this now with our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. Good morning, Cameron.
Good morning.
I suppose it's characteristically Catherine, isn't it, to say she doesn't want to distract from this report by sort of people talking about her health. But we should start probably by saying she said she's not feeling well enough to come and talk about this in public, but sort of saying she's watching it, keeping a close eye from behind closed doors.
Yeah, absolutely. This should not be seen as a return to work by the Princess of Wales, but I have been told she's A, read the report and B, been briefed on it. But this all stems really from her work when she started being a working member of the royal family, where she was working closely with people suffering from addiction, mental health problems. And what she found is all of these issues tend to stem from a poor start in life, so the first 5 years of a child's life. So in January 2023, she set up Shaping Us, this awareness campaign for the early years. 2 months later, she convened the business task force, so 8 members of big businesses across the UK, and over a generation, that could add as they claim more than £40 billion to the UK economy each year. We spoke to Peter Grigg yesterday. He's the chair of Home Starts UK, a charity which supports young families. Let's hear what he said about the Princess's role in this.
She's been a real driving force behind the report and everything it's done. And when we've spent time with the Royal Foundation, what it does, it reminds everyone that this is really important work and early childhood matters, that more businesses should get involved, that more charities are out there for people who want to do more to support families and children. So it's been a wonderful experience.
The People's Channel.
Very good morning, it's 10:36. It is, of course, D-Day, and we are reflecting on events down in Normandy. We'll be bringing you pictures live as the royals come and go there this morning. Susan has said a shout-out as well to Sophie Reaper. She covers so many difficult news stories, always very professional, and it's a good choice to send her to France. She's done a brilliant job.
She has been brilliant in France, and actually, the other day she got a little bit emotional, and I can well understand why. Because I tell you, when I meet those veterans, I well up every time.
Yeah. Somebody who calls themselves East Coast Guy, because I know a lot of you do actually watch in America as well. Anyone else noticed that the new election promises regarding all armed forces veterans, he feels like politicians are jumping on the D-Day bandwagon?
I'm glad someone's made that point. I wasn't going to. We heard Mel Stride, who's the Work and Pensions Secretary, out saying something today. It went over my head. And equally, John Healey, the Shadow Defence Secretary. Listen, guys, people see right through it. They could have done that 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
5 years ago. They're all as bad.
Yeah, and John, morning, John, he said, I'm watching your D-Day commemorations. The amount of French school children there taking part of the last 2 days is significant. They're obviously taught about D-Day. It feels like our kids aren't. It still doesn't mean they like us, though, even before Brexit.
But he's got a point,
you,
because there was that survey the other day saying, what was it, half of children of teenagers don't know what D-Day is, which is chills my blood to think about that, because it should be taught in schools.
Yeah, my children, I don't think they would know it's D-Day today.
A film like Saving Private Ryan, it's seen from an American perspective, but nevertheless, it tells you everything about D-Day and war and family and sacrifice and what it did to families and patriotism and duty. I think every kid should, every school child should see a film like that.
Yeah.
Or The Longest Day.
And also, people talking about our debate that we just had just now with Kevin Maguire about whether Keir Starmer would use private health care. Let's have a quick look here. Ian says, I had to pay private as my husband had a catheter for 3 months and was told he couldn't get an operation. For a time, he couldn't be given, but then also told the more time he had the catheter, the less chance he'd have been able to have it removed and live normally again. So Kevin Maguire is lying when he says he would badger. There's no way that it works. I don't think he's lying, but I think Kevin... How do you...
It's hope over substance, isn't it?
It is. And if you are badgering... I mean, Kevin said, I wouldn't want to jump the queue. I believe him in that. But, of course, if you're badgering to jump the queue. And there's no point badgering. I
still think, Bev, Starmer would have got more plaudits if he'd said, with the heaviest of heart, I have to admit, if it was somebody I love dearly and it could get them off a waiting list, off a hospital trolley, where potentially their life is under threat, I would pay whatever it took.
But I shouldn't have to. That's what he should have said. But I just shouldn't have to. Of course I would. I'd always put people first rather than ideology, but he didn't say that. Darren has said regarding Starmer with the waiting list, he lied through his teeth. He said no because he thought it would be a good thing to say to us lemmings. He obviously thinks it's something that we'd like to hear. I think that's on the money, Darren, I really do. I'd pay to go private in a heartbeat. He's a flip-flop lying rat who only wants the keys to number 10 at any cost. He's reminding me of a scally who's got the chance of getting a council house.
He's going to get the keys to number 10. He's actually got one foot over the threshold already. And, of course, we've seen this poll today which shows Reform are now within 2 points of catching up with the Tories. That is called the Nigel Farage effect.
That is the Nigel Farage. I'm so glad you brought that up because I was thinking about that. I was reading about this morning because some people are now looking at this election not as an election but as a referendum. It's a referendum almost on Brexit again, because if you have 51% of people who wanted to vote for Brexit, who see Nigel Farage, there could be more shocking reverberations if people start to see it like that.
Absolutely. We're going to cross now to our reporter, Jack Carson, who is at the National Memorial Arboretum, which is in Staffordshire. Hugely important part of the D-Day celebrations. Jack, morning to you, Jack. Sun is shining. Lots of veterans and military charities there, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's going to be a really big service later today at 2 o'clock when the Royal British Legion's commemorations here in the UK take place at the National Memorial Arboretum. Well, we're here in the beautiful sunshine, and we are delighted to be joined by Tom Hill, who's 98 and a Royal Marines veteran. Tom, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, you were part of the landing craft and crewed a landing craft which came over in the second wave. I mean, tell us what you remember about that day.
Well,
Oh, I think we've lost.
Oh. I think we might have lost Jack Carson. We've got Cameron Walker with us. Cameron, of course, at the Arboretum, the National Military Centre. We will see the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, who we know better as Sophie and Edward.
Yes, of course, used to be Earl and Countess of Wessex, now Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. So they are leading, I suppose, the British tributes today in terms of members of the royal family. Also, I feel like we need to give a massive shout-out to Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, who yesterday was a complete trooper herself and undertook 4 separate engagements in Normandy, visiting the Canadian Royal Regina reception. She also went to the Bayeux War Cemetery. She delivered a speech. She attended a service of commemoration at Bayeux Cathedral, as well as attended another kind of vigil at the War Cemetery as well. So she was very busy yesterday. We also have an update from the King and the Queen, who, as we've been speaking about, is attending the Royal British Legion's commemorative event. Now, the King's delivered a speech where he said, "It is with the most profound sense of gratitude that we remember them," as in D-Day veterans, "and all who served at that critical time." I also know that veterans during the King's speech were seen wiping their eyes with tissues as Charles made his address to them. Oh. The King also appeared emotional, as he has done, I think, a number of times over the last few days, and the Queen herself also seen with tears in her eyes and wiping her eyes during the King's speech, and this very clearly, very visibly moving Royal British Legion commemorative service. And at the same time, of course, we've got Prince William at the Canadian commemorations. These are live pictures, I believe, of those commemorations. He's there alongside Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister even of Canada, and Prime Minister Attal of France as well, organised by the Canadian government. Prince William expected to deliver a speech very shortly. We will be bringing that to you.
Do we have any validity of this, Cameron? This has just been, this is on NBC News site, saying that William said yesterday, asked by one veteran how Kate is, and he said she's feeling better.
Yes, he did. So after the Portsmouth commemorative service, which we covered yesterday, both the King, Queen and Prince of Wales met a number of these veterans, and one of the veterans asked William how the princess was doing, and Prince William said, "She's getting better, thank you," and she would have loved to have been here. So there was a bit of an update, and of course we have missed seeing her over these last few days.
You know, the other person I was thinking about today, and this will be very hard for him to be watching this from California. Prince Harry, of course, did active service in Afghanistan twice. He had a very good, distinguished military career. He took his military duties very seriously, but of course he chose to leave the royal family. No role for him, but if he hadn't chose to leave the room, he would be there side by side with his brother and his father in the thick of all of this.
Oh, 100%.
And the veterans would have been thrilled to see him.
Yeah, I think if he was still a working member of the royal family, you are absolutely right. He would have been pretty much front and centre after the King, because, as you say, he did serve 2 tours of Afghanistan, perhaps resonates a bit more with those D-Day veterans, because of course, Prince Harry did serve, in quite heavy conflicts there, whereas as heir to the throne, Prince William was not allowed to do that. And then, of course...
We're going to go, to interrupt, sorry, Cam, we're going to go right to France now, because Prince William, Prince of Wales, is just starting his speech.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister Trudeau, Prime Minister Attal, veterans and distinguished guests. Bonjour, Premier Ministre Trudeau, Premier Ministre Attal, vétérans et distingués invités. I'm honoured to join you to commemorate the bravery and sacrifice of the Canadian troops who gave so much 80 years ago. On June the 6th, 1944, as part of the 150,000 Allied troops that landed or parachuted into Normandy, 14,000 were from Canada. Far from home, they stormed these very sand dunes behind me, shoulder to shoulder with thousands of British troops. Standing here today in peaceful silence, it is almost impossible to grasp the courage it would have taken to run into the fury of battle that very day. The assault on D-Day remains the most ambitious military operation in history. The events of that windy, grey day ultimately led to the liberation of Europe, but it came at a heavy cost. We continue to honour every Canadian who gave so much, every Canadian family who lost a loved one, every Canadian who lived with the scars of battle, both physical and mental. I want to thank you, our veterans, for your extraordinary acts of bravery and sacrifice on Juno Beach and the liberation of Europe. All of you demonstrated heroism and determination that ensured fascism was conquered. The commitment to service displayed by Canadian troops is a great testament to the strength of the people of Canada. Canada and the UK continue to stand side by side, as we did in 1944, just as strong together 80 years later. Ensuring the memory of those who fought for freedom lives on is why we've come together again today, to say thank you. Thank you for our freedom, and thank you for your service. Merci pour notre liberté, et merci pour votre service.
Speech by the Prince of Wales and talking to, he's leading the Canadian commemoration. Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, I imagine he'll speak too. Cameron Walker, of course, Canada is the monarchy is still popular in Canada. This will underline the point.
Yeah, I think it certainly will. And Prince William spoke in his speech there that Canada and UK continue to stand side by side, just as they did 80 years ago. It shows how the monarchy really is perhaps the glue that holds the two nations diplomatically together, or at least in part. And I think the fact that we have a number of cadets, very young Canadians there, watching their future king deliver that speech, I think perhaps will help to shore up that kind of relationship. And we do have Prime Minister Trudeau coming onto the stage now, but he also, Prince William also spoke of the bravery and sacrifice of Canadian troops, and I think it's incredibly important to them to have a senior member of the royal family attend their vigil rather than the British one.
Canada has a long history in France. Because in the First World War, there was there's a war memorial in northern France called Vimy Ridge.
Yes,
and it is it's so moving. It's the most beautiful statue, and it's where the Canadians dug underneath the trenches, the German trenches, and caught the Germans from behind. And it was the most extraordinary bravery. And that part of France is known permanently as Canadian soil.
Yeah. This is actually French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal we're looking at here.
He's speaking in French.
He's speaking in
French. So we're going to give it a miss. He's the new Prime Minister. He's 34, 35, very young, very dashing. Caused a bit of upset the other day in France. I can't remember what that was about. But and Macron, of course, will make the main speech in the main...
Yes, so we've got the Omaha Beach commemoration, the international commemorative ceremony. So President Emmanuel Macron, as you say, is going to be there. We spoke of Australia, I believe, a little bit earlier on, because Australian troops also served in D-Day. It's the Governor-General of Australia representing the country at these D-Day commemorations rather than the Prime Minister.
Yeah. And our own Prime Minister is there, of course.
Yes.
He will presumably will speak too, I imagine, Cameron.
I think he certainly will. He's been at the Royal British Legion's commemorative event this morning with the King, the Queen and President Macron as well. I believe he may also be going to the Omaha Beach, though I don't believe believe that has been confirmed, but over 25 heads of state and veterans are going to be attending the international commemorative ceremony at Omaha Beach, including President Joe Biden, but Prince William representing his father there at the event due to the King's health struggles.
Will the King come back at that point to Britain? Yeah,
he's got no more engagements scheduled for today that we know of.
Probably for the rest of the week.
I don't think he's got any more scheduled. Of course, we also tomorrow Prince William's going to have to hotfoot it up to Chester for the wedding of the Duke of Westminster. Of course, he's being an usher at that wedding, so he's got a very busy week. But as for the King and Queen, they're not expected to attend that wedding. So I believe this perhaps is the last public engagements we have for His Majesty the King at this Royal British Legion's commemorative event. He's also meeting a number of D-Day veterans there as well. But I think what we've seen over the last few days is most working members of the royal family really rallying around and really making a point that us as Brits have to really honour the sacrifice of these D-Day veterans. And we spoke earlier about school children perhaps not knowing about what D-Day is.
It's sad.
And I understand that yesterday in Portsmouth there were hundreds of school children from the local area invited to this.
Good.
And it's understood that the powers that be, I suppose the Ministry of Defence and etc., really want to make a point of teaching the younger generation that it's incredibly important to keep remembering the sacrifices of their forefathers and being physically in the same venue as these D-Day veterans, 99, 100 years old, who 80 years ago today stormed the beaches of Normandy faced with German machine gun fire and God knows what else. I think it's that kind of memory that I think perhaps the royal family can help with, because it shines a spotlight on the occasion.
And I remember being at those beaches a couple of years ago and being told how some of those young men, because they had the heavy boots on, the packs, the rifles, if they fell in the water, some of them just drowned.
Yeah.
Because they were so weighed down, just drowned.
They did, and we've heard testimony over the last few days of soldiers arriving on D-Day +1 or very late in the evening, as one told the King, I believe, on D-Day itself, and just being met by a sea of bodies just drowned because they just didn't quite make it because it was so heavy.
Extraordinary.
One of our viewers, Andrew, who's got in touch to say, just a reminder that whilst D-Day was on, there were other military personnel fighting on many fronts around the world. My granddad was in Ceylon, he said. And, of course, it was the D-Day landings that sparked the end of the war. It was 3 months later, wasn't it, after the D-Day invasions? I think
And, of course, when the war ended, Victory in Europe, we had the Victory in Europe celebrations, it was still going on in the Far East.
That's right.
Yeah, and I was very lucky enough to interview a veteran of World War II called John. He's a Chelsea pensioner now, 100 years old, and he was called a D-Day dodger because he took part in the invasion of Italy a few months before and missed the Normandy landings on the beaches. But he kind of made the point that everyone who, sacrificed their lives invading Italy and coming up from the other end of Europe are kind of forgotten because all the spotlight is on D-Day and Normandy.
And it's tough because you can't, I suppose, as you say, you can't honour everybody, but of course it was because it was the largest ever
organised
force to invade ever in history, and will probably never be matched. I mean, it was literally hundreds of thousands, coordinated with Eisenhower, the Americans, and Churchill, and an extraordinary operation.
And it was seen as the turning point of World War II ending.
Within 11 months, it was Victory in Europe. And, of course, we shouldn't forget how many French civilians were killed.
Yeah. A number of civilians killed, French civilians, but also a number liberated by the Allied forces.
More pictures. We will bring you to the events this morning from Normandy and let us know your thoughts as well. This is Britain's Newsroom. We're also going to be crossing over to Wales to talk about Vaughan Gething. But
he's the First Minister. He's not resigning.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. In many respects, today's going to feel quite similar to yesterday, really. We still have plenty of showers feeding in across northern parts, particularly Scotland, perhaps Northern Ireland too. Some of these will be heavy, maybe thundery, could even be a bit of sleet or snow over the highest ground of the Scottish mountains too. Meanwhile, further south, yes, some showers around, but across many parts of central England and Wales and southern parts too, it is going to stay mostly dry and there will be some decent bright and sunny spells. However, we do have some cool air across us at the moment, so in the sunshine, not feeling too bad. It is early June after all, but generally temperatures a little disappointing perhaps, especially in the north. As we go through this evening then, still watch out for some heavy showers across parts of Scotland, and like I said, there could be some rumbles of thunder. There could even be a bit of hail mixed in, which could cause some problems on the roads, and all the time some winteriness possible over the Scottish peaks. Also plenty of showers as we go through this evening across northern England, Northern Ireland, but a drier story further south. Yes, there are some showers, but any showers here are going to be pretty short-lived, quite fleeting, and most of us will avoid them. Overnight, we are going to stick with the north-south split when it comes to our shower amounts. In terms of across the south, it is going to stay largely dry and some clear skies here. Further north, plenty of showers. In fact, a swathe of more focused showery rain pushing its way in across Scotland as we go through the early hours of tomorrow morning. Where we get the clear skies, it is going to be a bit chilly. Temperatures could drop to low single figures, perhaps. A touch of grass frost is possible in a few spots. The showery rain across Scotland will feed into northern England as we go through tomorrow morning. Further south, again, a few showers are possible, but generally a fine picture here, but a bit more cloud as we go into the afternoon. Elsewhere, and there will again be plenty of showers pushing in across parts of Scotland, possibly Northern Ireland too, and once more, these could turn heavy and maybe even thundery. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the Great British Summer Giveaway, and have we got a prize for you? There's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel. Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
.11 a.m. on Thursday the 6th of June. Very significant day, 80th anniversary of D-Day. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. As the world remembers that pivotal day which turned the course of the war.
And at the British ceremony, a fly past marks the occasion as the red, white and blue streams across the sky. Our reporters are there.
The world remembers today marks the 80th anniversary when British and Allied forces stormed the beaches here at Normandy to attack German forces.
And remembrance events across the United Kingdom are getting underway to remember those who paid the ultimate sacrifice.
I'm in the garrison city of Lisburn, where the theme really is the education of children. Hundreds of school children have been brought in to be educated in the relevance of this day.
Thank you, Dougie Beatty. Now, no confidence in Gethin. The First Minister of Wales, Vaughan Gethin, has vowed to carry on despite losing a no-confidence vote. He's basically said, I'm not going to go and you can't make me. We'll have the latest.
And pitifully. And what a pitiful figure he cut, weeping.
I mean,
pathetic. He's the First Minister of Wales. He's been there 78 days. He's lost a vote motion of no confidence. He says it doesn't count because 2 Labour members were sick. Hello, Mr Gethin. One of them was the minister you sacked.
Well,
they were convenient illnesses. Do you remember when Mrs Thatcher was in trouble in 1990? She wanted John Major to endorse her nomination papers in the second ballot. He had a problem with his wisdom tooth.
Yes,
do you remember?
Of course. Yes. Well, GBNews.com/your say is the site to let us know your thoughts. This morning, we'll be talking about the Wales situation in just a moment and more D-Day celebrations. First, though, here's Sophia Wensler.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 2 minutes past 11. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your top story this hour. Senior members of the royal family and world leaders are gathering with veterans in Normandy to mark the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings. On the 6th of June 1944, tens of thousands of British and Allied soldiers landed on 5 beaches in northern France to push back German forces. King Charles has praised D-Day veterans at the UK's commemoration event in Vers-sur-Mer in France. The King and Queen were joined by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron. Meanwhile, Prince William has spoken at Juno Beach for the Canadian commemorative service. In the UK, D-Day commemorations are also underway across the country. In Lisbon, in Northern Ireland, the town crier delivered a D-Day proclamation. A flotilla of boats will leave Cornwall, where thousands of troops departed to take part in the invasion. Meanwhile, a beacon lighting ceremony will take place in Kent. The Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh will join veterans at the Royal British Legion Remembrance Service in Staffordshire, and the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester will meet veterans at a show at the Royal Albert Hall in London. The Prime Minister has pledged to boost veteran benefits in an election offering. Rishi Sunak says he wants to make the UK the best place in the world to have served in the armed forces. The policy pledge on the 80th anniversary of D-Day includes reducing the price of the Veterans Rail Card from £30 per year to £21 and extending the existing national insurance relief for employers who hire ex-military members. Labour claims the Tory record on veterans is shameful and their election plans mean no change. But Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Mel Stride, says it's an important step forward.
We are to be re-elected, and there we'll be looking at further plans and strategic plans that there will be a duty on ministers to come forward with. We're going to be decreasing the cost of the rail card to veterans from £30 to £21. We're going to be extending the national insurance reductions that are available to employers that recruit veterans, for example, where we know we have higher employment rates amongst veterans than we do across the population more generally. So we stand full square with them, and I think this is an important step forward.
But Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey says Labour would go further for veterans.
Unfortunately, the government's created over 14 years a postcode lottery on help for veterans. They've halved the support on employment, and they've allowed veterans' homelessness to rise over the last year, not end it. And there's much more that can be done and needs to be done. We would start by putting fully into law the Armed Forces Covenant. Now, that would reinforce and strengthen the rights of veterans to services and also of service personnel and their families. We'd also legislate in the first year of a Labour government for a new independent armed forces commissioner.
In other news, a rescue operation is underway in the English Channel, with reports of up to 80 migrants in the water. British and French vessels have raced to the scene about halfway across the Channel between Calais and Dover. GB News has been told that as many as 250 migrants are currently in boats on the French side of the Channel this morning and are attempting to cross to the UK. An Israeli airstrike on a UN school in central Gaza has killed at least 27 people. That's according to local officials. Ambulances and rescue teams have been rushing to the wounded and to the dead to the nearby hospital. The Israeli military said it carried out a strike on a UN school that housed Hamas compound, and 20 to 30 fighters were inside. The Hamas media office has rejected the claim, accusing Israel of committing a horrific massacre. And a 43-year-old man has been found guilty of headbutting football pundit Roy Keane at a match. Scott Law, who's 43 and from Waltham Abbey in Essex, had pleaded not guilty to a charge of common assault in relation to an incident in which he and Mr Keane clashed on September the 3rd last year after Arsenal's 3-1 victory over Manchester United. The ex-Ireland international, who was working as a pundit for Sky Sports, was headbutted through doors at the Emirates Stadium by Law. Law's defence team claimed CCTV footage from inside the stadium showed former Manchester United player Mr Keane elbowing the defendant in the face. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
It's 11:07. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearson and Bev Turner on this historic day, because it was 80 years ago, D-Day, when tens of thousands of British troops, many of them young men, some of them 16, 17, 18, stormed the beaches of Normandy, an event which turned the course of the war.
That's right. We've got reporters all around the country this morning and also, of course, in Normandy. So let's go now to Sophie Reaper, who is in Normandy, and we're going to speak also to Dougie Beattie, who is in Lisbon. Good morning, Sophie. Great to see you. Lots of commendations coming into our inbox as well about your work this week, Sophie. What has it been like there and how is it today?
Thank you very much for that, Bev. It's been an absolute privilege. I couldn't imagine anything better than having been given the opportunity to come here and see the commemorations and speak to those wonderful men, our veterans. So it really has been an honour. Today we're here in Arromanches in Parade Square, where we're currently just to my left. We're seeing a ceremony between the Dutch forces and bring them together with the British. We've just seen the final remaining Dutch veteran who was on D-Day. He just come to inspect some wreaths that have been laid. We've also just seen the Mayor of Arromanches come to see that, because that, of course, is what D-Day and these commemorations and celebrations are all about. It's about bringing together those veterans and bringing together all those countries who risked their lives during World War II for our freedom. And on that note, we thought it might be quite interesting for our viewers to see some of the coverage that D-Day has been getting here in France. So we've got a few of the papers that are here today. The first one here, this is actually really quite interesting because it is a special bilingual edition between this paper and an English, one of the national press in England, and that there, the headline is D-Day 80 years, the landing, and a picture there, I think you can see one of the landing crafts that would have landed 80 years ago today. Also really interestingly, this paper itself is celebrating its 80th anniversary this year, so I'm sure for this paper it's really rather special. You can see, of course, it is leading. They've got, I apologise for the wind, they've got a special bit here about Winston Churchill, really just taking in what exactly would have been happening on D-Day. We've also got this one, which is perhaps one of the loveliest stories to come out of D-Day. This man here, a 100-year-old veteran, has travelled to France to marry his 98-year-old sweetheart as part of the anniversary of D-Day. The lovebirds of D-Day there. How absolutely incredible is that, to be able to take in a story like that? D-Day of course, the most harrowing events that one could possibly imagine, but to bring such joy on a day like this, and that is what it's all about, of course, isn't it? We're commemorating, but we are also celebrating. And I think we've got one final paper from here. This isn't a French paper, it's the New York Times. But there we see that headline there, last hurrah for D-Day heroes. Of course, as we know, this most likely, the 80th anniversary, will be the last anniversary of D-Day that we get to commemorate with those veterans. Of course, as I mentioned before, we've just seen the last remaining, just one more veteran who is Dutch. Of course, there are not many British veterans left. We are expecting to see some of them later here in Parade Square in Arromanches. They're currently up at where the Vesemur, in where the royals and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has also spoken today. We're expecting them later here in Arromanches, of course, where the thousands of the crowds gathered here will be able to pay their respects to our remaining veterans on this incredible day.
Lovely, thank you, Sophie. Really interesting look at how it's being handled on the front page of the papers around the world as well there, Sophie. Reba there in Normandy.
Great to see so many people turning out too.
Yeah. Let's go now to Doogie Beatty, where I think the sound of children running around there. Doogie, where are you? What's going on?
Well, I'm in the beautiful Lisburn city centre. This is, of course, a garrison town, and Lisburn and Castlereagh City Council have really put an emphasis here on educating the young as to the relevance of this day. And joining me now is an SDLP councillor, Pat Catney. Pat, just tell us, what's the relevance of this day for you?
Doug, as I grew up, my father survived the last war, and his younger brother of 19, just prior to D-Day, was blew up off the coast of Tenerife in the Atlantic. So every time that I went out to visit my grandparents, there was always the photograph of my Uncle Lawrence, who I never met at 19, and his medals that he had there. I think that it's a reflection and a commemoration of the bravery of those that went before us. It means an awful lot to me that it embraces all of our district, and I absolutely was delighted to be part of the commemoration service today, but also part of that committee that organised and helped organise the events today, along with our officers.
So, I mean, what have you done? How have you afforded the ratepayer to actually bring all these children here?
Yes, so we knew that we wanted to do to have the commemoration. There was an underspend in the budget, and I'm glad that we were able to use that underspend to bus the children that are here today. It's all about education, Doug. This is education. We raised the flag of peace today. That flag of peace is very important. It's for this generation, and we need to educate them of the horrors of Nazism and the Third Reich as it was then. I have a daughter now living in Dachau, and that to me is the horrors of what I don't want to attack all of the German people. There was only 1/3 of the German people that voted for that. But we have a great opportunity here today to educate all our young people. And as you see, they're here. The world is in a dangerous place at the minute, and we need to strive for peace the best we possibly can.
Well, thank you for that, Pat, and it is a credit to Lisburn Council at this moment in time, I must say. I mean, there is absolutely hundreds of children running about here, people dressed in the period costumes. As he said there, we've seen a proclamation this morning from the Time Crier, we've seen a flag being raised, we've seen wreaths laid at a war memorial, and this event in Castle Gardens today is really, really, really important for the children here to remember not only D-Day, but the events that ran up to it.
Lovely, thank you, Doogie. It's great to see kids being educated about it as well, isn't it?
Really important.
Sophie and Doogie, thank you so much. We'll be back to you a bit later.
Really important. We don't know, you've got kids at school. Do they get taught about D-Day?
Don't know. It's exam week this week, so all the kids are doing exams this week. No, they're not really talking about it.
Do they talk about, well, VE Day and VJ Day, Victory in Japan?
Not really. Probably not, no. When I'm thinking about the history revision that the kids have been doing recently, there is British history in there. They do talk about British history.
Yeah, it's probably 1066.
Yeah, exactly. It's older than... I don't know what the curriculum is around World War II. Not enough. Probably, frankly. Right, still to come this morning, Vaughan Gething has lost a motion of no confidence as First Minister of Wales, but he's currently saying that he's not going to resign. It's like a sort of sit-in, really,
This is shameless.
Unbelievable. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Almost half of those seeking to have an affair are happier with their job than with their primary relationship. But what exactly does a cheater do for a living?
Well, medical assistants and nurses, surprisingly, top the lists of professions for female cheaters, and it's jobs in IT or tech for male cheaters, which I think is less of a surprise.
No.
This is all according to a survey by the dating site Ashley Madison.
OK, so why do people cheat? To answer this, we're joined now by broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Good morning, Lucy.
Morning, Lucy.
So, is it OK of me to say naughty nurses in this day and age? Am I going to get cancelled for that?
You're out.
Yeah, I'm out.
Been
Gone.
cancelled.
See ya.
There's the door.
There we
But
go.
yes, you're talking about the caring professions, and I think it's very appropriate.
Surprised by that.
That women, well, because they're very nurturing, very loving, very giving, whereas the males who are in tech and IT, very strategic.
Is there a link between high-pressure jobs, maybe nurses infamously, you know, they're working long hours, underpaid, stressed out? Is there a link between jobs of that nature and cheating, maybe as a relief?
Absolutely. Is it just about sex, or is it about emotional connection? Is it about emotional validation? And increasingly, people are discovering that their primary relationship is just not a place where they feel safe.
This survey found that personality didn't actually come into it that much. It was about half and half if you're an introvert or an extrovert that you'd be likely to have an affair.
I think that's right. And I think that just speaks to the fact that all people want to have a good emotional connection. So it doesn't matter whether you're really social or whether you're someone who has to recharge your batteries in private time, that actually we only ever want three things in life. We want to feel safe, we want to feel loved, but we also want to feel heard. And in increasingly a number of marriages and long-term relationships, we get into grooves, we get into ruts, and we stop hearing our partner, we stop listening to them, and they stop listening to us.
The People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
(11:18), Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Bismuth on this very, very special day.
The King has delivered a speech at the UK's commemorative event in Normandy for the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings. Here it is.
80 years ago, on D-Day, the 6th of June 1944, our nation and those which stood alongside us faced what my grandfather, King George VI, described as the supreme test. How fortunate we were, and the entire free world, that a generation of men and women in the United Kingdom and other allied nations did not flinch when the moment came to face that test. On the beaches of Normandy, in the seas beyond, and in the skies overhead, our armed forces carried out their duty with a humbling sense of resolve and determination, qualities so characteristic of that remarkable wartime generation. Very many of them never came home. They lost their lives on the D-Day landing grounds or in the many battles that followed. It is with the most profound sense of gratitude that we remember them and all those who served at that critical time.
So that's the King talking movingly at the D-Day commemorations. Poignant, extraordinary. Journalist broadcaster Carol Malone's here and political commentator Jonathan Lee. So they normally disagree about everything, but Carol, I think you two
No one can disagree on this. You know, 80 years ago today, you know, dawn broke and 136,000 troops marched onto those beaches in Normandy. You know, it's... we can't imagine today, can we, the unimaginable courage it took for those men to do it. There's a great piece in one of the papers today where the gentleman says it's the 103-year-old veteran, and he says, you know, I thought if I'm going to get hit, make it quick so that he doesn't feel it. Now, you know, no young person alive today, no one of 20 today can imagine what these 18, 20-year-old lads went through. And it moves me beyond speech, really, because I know that I'm looking at this D-Day and there will probably never be another one.
No, there won't.
The next one, those veterans who are there today may not be with us anymore. The ones who are 103, the ones who are 98. And it will be their children who come to keep the torch of remembrance burning. But, you know, I feel a lot of young people today don't understand the relevance of D-Day. It's not their fault. They've never known anything like it. They didn't live in those times. They've never known war. I feel they should be taught about the relevance of it. And the thing is, you know, to say it's not relevant, they literally couldn't be more wrong. You know, we see what's happening in Russia. We see with China flexing its muscles. We see the militias in flames. We see all of that. And this could happen again, you know. And I think it's just... Children, young people need to be prepared that it might, but they also need to thank the people whose sacrifice means that they have the lives they have today.
Quite right. Jonathan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a deeply moving event. Obviously, it's the final farewell, I suppose, to a generation. Next year for VE Day, the 80th anniversary of VE Day will be, I think, the final one. I was very struck by the stat that I think there were 228 or so veterans who went to the 75th anniversary of D-Day, only 23, I think, this year. But also, you know, there are the people that those veterans left behind. My friend Anthea, a dear friend of mine, her father died on D-Day. I think she was actually on the BBC yesterday, and she's out in France. And you know, she is still as fresh in her mind as a day as a 9-year-old girl, where she came home from school, and you know, her mother in tears and sort of told her about the telegram and everything. And that really stays with you your whole life. So you have the war. It kind of does pass down through the generations. And, you know, Carol was right. We can't possibly imagine what that was like. But it's absolutely right that we should commemorate these events and not have them as any kind of sort of party political acts. They are an opportunity for the country to come together and give thanks to a generation.
I think what it also does is it makes you realise, you know, the politicians at the moment are scrapping about Trident and nuclear weapons and all the rest of it. The bottom line is what this reminds you of is that we have to ensure that our country is protected. I mean, above all, so that this can't happen to us again. And I think it, you know, to have a 21st century slant on it, this is what needs to happen. But you know, watching these guys, you know, Charles and Camilla were clearly moved. The pictures on all the front pages today, tears in their eyes. And you know, I saw Charles talking to a veteran, and you know, I think it was at Buckingham Palace a few days ago. And you know, we've always accused him of not having compassion or empathy, but with these guys, he is so empathetic, so compassionate. And he was saying, my grandfather did this and my thing, and these guys had met the people he was talking about. They were talking about meeting Montgomery, his uncle, and he was fantastic with them. And I was looking at it and thinking, Charles is 74 years old, which is an age, but he's still 20-odd years younger than most of these guys that he's talking to.
And at times like this, also, I know I don't want to make this about Republicans versus monarchy, but it's one I'm glad we've got a monarchy because they're not political. It's not some boring president making the speech. And his family, the royal family, was steeped in the Second World War, Jonathan.
Yeah, exactly.
It really was.
Look, well, I'm actually a monarchist anyway, which is my least left-wing opinion, I suppose. But, you know, I remember VE Day in 1995 when you had the Queen Mother, who was the Queen during the Second World War. And, you know, people of my age, we can sort of remember the 50th anniversary of all these events where, you know, there were just thousands and thousands of people who could remember these events. And now we've got to the stage where, you know, we kind of can count them, you know,
and in the hundreds. Exactly.
And much like, you know, how sort of 25, 30 years ago, you could still meet people just about who'd fought in the Great War, the First World War. And now, obviously, there is no one at all alive who can even remember it, really. So that's time does move on. We have to hold on to these memories.
I think that's the, you know, it's not because it's my paper, but I just think that, to me, sums everything up, you know, eternally in their debt.
Yeah. What a lovely old guy. He's probably one of the young ones. He could be 99.
He says 90. He's 99. He's one of the
youngest. A youngster.
There's one that's 103.
I know, amazing.
So, you know, thank you for them.
Right, let's talk about politics just for a moment, guys. Of course, we have still got the general election coming up. It is a day to reflect on Normandy, but let's get the wisdom of your insight into these stories. So, Jonathan, what do we want to start with? Do we want to start with the reform effect? And Nigel, one poll today showing that reform are only a couple of percentage points behind the polls from the Conservatives.
And Bev, under the old YouGov methodology, they're neck and neck, because YouGov has just changed its methodology. Now, this is the Tories' absolute worst nightmare. All the pundits were saying, well, it's extremely bad for the Tories, but thank goodness Nigel Farage hasn't entered the fray because that is apocalypse scenario. And lo and behold, Farage has decided to finish them off. And who can blame him, frankly? I would do the same if I was him. So now you have the Tories looking at an existential scenario. People are talking a lot more about Canada in 1993 than UK in 1997. That's when the Conservative Party in Canada went from being in the government to winning 2 seats in the Canadian House of Commons.
And the Canadian Prime Minister, she lost her seat at the Prime Minister.
Right. And so, you know, obviously, I think it's important. I don't support one-party states. I'm sure we won't have a one-party state. But the Conservatives, you know, you can't argue with the voters. And you're going to have a lot of scenarios where Reform and the Tories are going to split the vote, and Labour will, I'm sure, slip through the middle.
I think this might turn into another Brexit referendum, Carol, in a way, with Nigel at the helm.
I think you're spot on. I mean, there's talk now that Reform are going to get 4 or 5 seats, but I have a feeling it might even be more than that. But, you know, the Tories are idiots because they must, you know, there's snobbery and snottery among the wets and the Tories. They could see this guy had the Boris effect. They could see he could lead people. I've been on the campaign trail with him before, and he's like a messiah. People come to him, you know.
He's a very naughty boy, Carol.
The fact that the Tories, have ignored that, the fact that a week ago, when Nigel put out the suggestion there could be a deal to be done, Sunak just whipped, you know, said no.
Carol, I read about this yesterday, and about 6 to 7 weeks ago, Dame Andrew Jenkins, Tory MP, hardline Brexiteer. Reform were desperate for her to defect, but she didn't. She's always going to stay true to Tories. She went into Number 10 and said, if you do a deal around the European Convention of Human Rights, if you do this, there's just a chance. Farage's phone number was being bandied about. But what happened?
Do it.
Sunak's unelected advisers, they can't think about Farage with their peg on their nose.
He's spot on right, because this has been happening. It's funny, because I heard Starmer today, you know, trying to say that, you know, he's trying to knock Sunak down now. Well, he's down already, saying that, you know, Sunak is a liar. And he said, I don't use this word casually, but he does, actually, because he used it about Boris too. But, you know, Boris was one of those people, like Farage, that he could bring people, love him or hate him, he can bring people in. And to have this guy who has so much sway in the country, he's the most effective political figure of the last 50 years. And they have ignored him at their peril. And now they're going to lose seats. Exactly what we all said. The vote is going to be split. And we've got, they put on something like 25% of new members since Monday, since Farage announced that he was coming. Their coffers are swelled by 200 grand. So they're ready to rock. And they will take seats. And it should, you know, all of the Red Wall will vote for Reform, because because they don't want to vote Labour. They're not convinced by
Oh, you think that they're surely all the red wall seats will go back to Labour?
I don't think they will for a second.
I think Reform might win some seats in the
Me
Reform.
too.
100%. If you think about who Nigel Farage appeals to.
Yes, it's immigration.
I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's likelier that the right-wing vote will split and Labour will split to the middle.
I hear that, but I do not think Keir Starmer particularly resonates with working-class white voters. I just don't think he does.
You find a lot of late leavers who then went Conservative in 2019. They lent their vote. They didn't become Conservatives. They will go back. Labour's in the DNA of a lot of those places.
People are smarter than this, you know. At that debate the other night, you heard Starmer. You heard the groans in the audience when Starmer went, "My father was a tool maker." No, your father was not a tool maker. Your father owned the tool-making factory. So stop pretending to be something.
He comes from humble background.
He does not have a humble background. He went to private school.
No. He was at a grammar school that became a private school. He was not. His parents did not pay school.
Also, just bear in mind, though, those people that lent that vote in 2019 to Boris Johnson did it to get Brexit done.
They did.
Yes.
If they look at Farage now and go, right, well, this sort haven't got Brexit done, I'm going to vote for the Reform
And Starmer
Party.
certainly won't get Brexit done because Starmer wanted to unpick it.
Andrew,
he thinks we don't take enough illegal migrants.
The interesting thing about Brexit is no one's talking about it. Remainers aren't talking about it either.
They might do now. That's the thing with Nigel in. They might start doing something.
That's because Starmer can't, because he tried to overturn Brexit.
That's not why.
Yes,
it's because it almost
That's exactly why.
Right, Jonathan and Carol, thank you so much for now. You'll be back in the next hour, and of course we will have more of the moving footage from... Oh, no, it's 11:30 already. How's that happened? Sorry, guys.
Only one of them today.
Just one dose today.
Yeah.
But a few doses of Sophia Wensler. Here she is now with your news.
Bev, thank you. From the GB Newsroom at 11:31, your headlines. The King has spoken of his profound sense of gratitude to those who fought in the D-Day invasion as he addressed veterans during the 80th anniversary commemorations in Normandy. Veterans could be seen wiping their eyes with tissues as Charles made his address at the national commemorative event in France. They were joined by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron.
It is with the most profound sense of gratitude that we remember them and all those who served at that critical time. We recall the lesson that comes to us again and again across the decades. Free nations must stand together to oppose tyranny.
And in the UK, D-Day commemorations are also underway across the country. In Lisbon, in Northern Ireland, the town crier delivered a D-Day proclamation. And a flotilla of boats will leave Cornwall, where thousands of troops departed to take part in the invasion, while a beacon lighting ceremony is taking place in Kent. And the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh will join veterans at a Royal British Legion Remembrance Service in Staffordshire. And the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester will meet veterans at a show at the Royal Albert Hall in London. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2785 and €1.1751. The price of gold is £1,846 and 15 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,274 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
11:33. Emily and Tom are here with us to tell us what's coming up on Good Afternoon Britain. What have you got, guys?
Such a special day.
Really is.
We're going to be backwards and forwards across the channel throughout the programme as more and more happens with regard to the astonishing anniversary. And I heard one thing this morning about the anniversary of D-Day, that sort of 80 isn't always sort of the stark anniversary. Normally you'd think it's sort of the centenary. But thinking about it, when we have the centenary of D-Day, there won't be anyone left who actually fought on those beaches. This is the last big ceremony where we can actually hear those stories firsthand.
Yes, I saw a statistic that 5 years ago there were 100 veterans, and now there are only a couple of dozen.
Well, there's 23
left.
there today.
So very sad, very sad. And just thinking about how young some of these men were who sacrificed their lives, and those that did survive. Incredibly moving coverage this morning, I must say.
The youngsters out there are 98.
Yeah.
Is that incredible? Really incredible.
98 years old.
And Ellie was saying, who's done great sterling stuff out this morning, just how humbling it is to speak to them.
Yeah.
Because of what they saw, what they took in their stride.
Yeah.
I mean...
And often you hear them talk about the fact that they've never really discussed what they went through. And that's why they kind of cry probably at 98, because they really haven't discussed a lot. And we've had people getting in touch this morning saying, and yet the younger generation need a trigger warning when they go to the theatre.
Yes,
they're saying that if you want to talk about triggers, talk to those men about how different the generations are.
It is astonishing. It's very interesting when these veterans get into their very late years. They start talking about about their experiences, and it's so important to pass that on to their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, possibly.
There are all sorts of other stories as well. I was talking to Ellie Costello, who came across a woman who was one of the first liberated children. Living in France, in a little village just not far from the beach, when all the Allied troops got there and they liberated that town. And this woman, now obviously an elderly woman, but a child at the time, said, well, when the Nazis took the town, they buried all of their booze in the garden. Thousands of bottles of champagne.
Woman after my own heart.
What did they do when the Allied troops got there? They dug them up and had the most enormous celebration.
Wow.
Did you say 3,000 bottles or something like that?
Bottles.
There must have been
under the
hell of a hangover the very next
Can
day.
you imagine?
But this woman has, for every anniversary since, been throwing a champagne reception to honour those Allied troops who came over and
Just feels so privileged to live in this day and age
agree.
and think about what those men put themselves
And quite
through.
interesting, the British Legion are doing collections and putting out poppies today as well, and I think I've seen quite a lot of people wearing poppies. Quite right, it shouldn't only have to be on Remembrance Day.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, and it's not about glorifying war.
No.
War is a horrible thing.
Yeah.
It's about remembering the sacrifice.
Yeah. It certainly is.
So, yes, we'll be continuing on, and, of course, we'll sprinkle in a little bit of what's going on politics-wise.
Don't forget Crybaby Gething.
Good.
And we are going to be talking about...
I was watching what he said yesterday as he said it, as if the biggest tragedy of yesterday evening was the fact he'd have to get a slightly later ferry to be in Normandy. Oh, woe is him.
Absolutely.
The biggest trial and tribulation on a day when we should be remembering those who fell and those who gave so much for us is Vaughan Gething having to get a slightly later ferry.
Being inconvenienced by all of this democratic nonsense is effectively what he said, didn't he? Right, Emily and Tom, we've got to shush. We're going to be talking about that in just a moment. Emily and Tom will be here for midday, but quick break and back to that Gethin Jones story. Vaughan Gething.
Just call him Crybaby.
Worse than that.
Just call him Crybaby Jones.
Nana Queer. Weekends from 3 p.m.
What about the elections? Because it seems that the King and everything is moving because of it, and we've got a lot of royal engagements and things that happen at this time.
Yes, well, you know, it means that he has to take more time and be at home. He can't go to all the things he wants to do. He's been doing 5 a day, which is probably made Camilla a bit cross. But what they still hope is that they can get the Japanese emperor and empress over. That's in July. That they can go to France for the 80th anniversary of the fighting. And he will be able to do 1 or 2 things. And Ascot he's very keen to do. Now, those aren't things that are political in any way. Just want to talk about Harry and Charles's argument, where Harry said he didn't want to stay, he wanted to go to a hotel. And it's come out now that actually King Charles is believed that he was put into, offered St James's, and Princess Anne stays there, and Beatrice stays there.
And this was for when Harry came over
when
for
he
his
came
10th
over, yeah,
anniversary for
exactly.
Invictus.
And the policemen are wandering around with guns, and there's no chance of actually there being any problem there. So the fact that he said that it wasn't safe for him was not actually a very sensible thing to say, I don't think.
Well, he went to Nigeria, and that is, in the world ranking, it's ranked as quite a dangerous place.
Yes, one of the dangerous places in the world. But now Harry and Meghan have been invited to go to Ghana.
Oh, God. Well, it's interesting because my parents are from Ghana. I have Ghanaian heritage, and I'm thinking she'll probably then claim there's a percentage that she's Ghanaian as well. I'll be like, hang on a minute, you were Maltese, you're also Nigerian,
and
now you're going to say you're Ghanaian and German.
Yeah.
Come on. Thank you very much.
Squeeze it in.
Yeah, let's get them all in. Angela Levin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The People's Channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News.
the People's Channel.
Britain's election channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
11:40 is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. We've been talking about Vaughan Gething, the First Minister of Wales. Unprecedented. He's lost a motion of no confidence. 2 Labour MPs didn't vote for him. He makes the point that, oh, well, they were sick. One of them, of course, was the minister he sacked. She wasn't sick. She just conveniently didn't want to support him.
Well, he was in tears yesterday. Here he is, before the result was read in the Welsh Senate.
Cry baby.
He's under pressure to resign, but he said he's not going to.
Even though he's lost the confidence of the Senate.
It's just extraordinary. Let's bring in political correspondent Catherine Forster. Catherine, just explain this to us, because there is no mechanism to make him go, is there? I mean, what point of principle is he basing this decision on?
Yes, good morning, Andrew and Bev. It is quite extraordinary because the vote yesterday, which he narrowly lost by 2 votes, is non-binding. So he doesn't have to pay attention to it. And he's basically said, I am not going anywhere. But it's quite incredible. I mean, we think of Westminster as being a hotbed of political chaos, but look what's happened in the SNP in Scotland with Humza Yousaf having to go after just over a year. And here we are. It's just 78 days since I was standing here talking to you on GB News about Vaughan Gething, Welsh First Minister. Not even 3 months he's been in the job. But at that time, and ever more loudly since, there has been a lot of unhappiness about this £200,000 campaign donation that he accepted from a company linked to a man convicted twice of dumping waste. Now, as Sir Keir Starmer told me when I asked him about this last week in Wales, no rules have been broken, but the Welsh Conservatives who brought this vote of no confidence forward, they say that it's about judgment. Andrew R.T. Davis said it's about judgment, transparency and honesty. So Plaid Cymru, the Welsh Tories, the Lib Dems, and we know that there's 2 Welsh Labour MSs very unhappy too. They think this is about poor judgment and that this is simply indefensible. Worth saying that 200,000, Vaughan Gething ultimately had nearly 4 times as much money to spend on his campaign as Jeremy Miles, the other man who he lost narrowly to Vaughan Gething. Most of the MSs here didn't support Vaughan Gething in the first place, but the unions did. So there was a lot of unhappiness then, and it is built up now. I was talking to locals here in Cardiff a little bit earlier. Let's have a look at what they had to say.
It would probably be the decent thing to do. He's failed a vote of no confidence, so his own people don't want him. So
he hasn't been in very long, has he?
Well, it doesn't really matter. Look at the British Prime Ministers. Somebody lost a lettuce, was it? The life of a lettuce or something? So it don't really matter the term. The term doesn't really matter. It's whether you can do the job or not, I believe.
The person he's taken the donation off is not a very respectable person. So, you know, you can't sort of call out other parties and ask them to resign and then not do the decent thing again. But that's Labour all over, isn't it?
Well, if you haven't broken any rules, why don't you give the money back? And I mean, when I say this, he said in government a couple of days ago that I haven't got £200,000 or whatever. Well, I looked him up on Google and it tells you how much they all got, and he's worth £5 million.
Are you a Welsh Labour voter?
No, I was, but I will never vote Labour again.
Safe to say, not much sympathy for the Welsh First Minister there. Now he's in Normandy today attending the D-Day commemorations, but my goodness, there's going to be a huge amount of pressure on him, and this is not very helpful for Sir Keir Starmer either, is it, in the middle of a general election campaign?
Catherine, last week we had Keir Starmer in Wales, and we know in the past he's hailed Wales as the blueprint for how he will govern the United Kingdom as Prime Minister. Wales has been under Labour control since devolution. He could intervene behind the scenes or even publicly to say to Vaughan Gething, be off with you, because this is embarrassing, it's going to drag the Labour vote down. Or do you think he just wants to get this to go away so that he doesn't resign during a general election campaign? What's going on with Starmer?
Well, I do wonder whether he might hang on for now and then stand down after the general election. Of course, we don't know. I did think it was interesting when I was at the Welsh Labour launch of, with Keir Starmer last week. He did not appear along with Vaughan Gething. He was not alongside him on stage. When he went up to Scotland, he was alongside Anna Sarwar there. So draw your own conclusions. But, it is quite extraordinary. He's lost the confidence of the Senate at this point in time. It's very difficult to see how he can really continue indefinitely. Let's see what happens.
OK, thank you, Catherine Forster there.
That's quite interesting, isn't it? Very good point, Catherine. He was there all over the Scottish First Minister, but no sign of the... They're so dishonest about it, aren't they? Really?
I'm repeatedly disappointed by people in power, let me tell you.
Honestly.
We're going to be crossing back to Normandy for the latest on the 80th anniversary of D-Day in just a moment, and we'll tell you which long-standing Coronation Street cast member is stepping down. Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. It's a mixture of sunny spells and showers across the UK, rather cool and breezy, particularly across the north. So the reason for this is low pressure sat to the north of the UK. It has been for a few days and will continue right through the rest of the week into the weekend, bringing showers, longer spells of rain. And that's what we have through the rest of Thursday. A scattering of showers across the northern half of the UK. Further south, generally drier, but there will be one or two showers. Often rather cloudy, but there will be some sunny spells developing at times. And in the south, in the sunshine, temperatures reaching 18, 19 Celsius. Quite cool for the time of year across the north of the UK, 13 to 15 degrees with those showers. It will be quite chilly and quite a brisk breeze, particularly across northern Scotland. The strongest winds across the Northern Isles as well here, 30 miles an hour or so. With frequent showers moving through as well as we go into the evening time. Further showers, Northern Ireland, central southern Scotland into northern England. Some of these on the heavy side. Temperatures disappointing for an evening in early June. Some late sunshine across southern areas, one or two showers possible. Turning quite chilly as the sun sets through into the evening time. And generally across England and Wales, we'll see clear skies developing. One or two showers are possible, but across parts of northern and western Scotland and later on across Northern Ireland, this band of rain moves in, which could be quite heavy at times. Temperatures under the clearest skies, quite chilly, falling into single figures, mid to low single figures for one or two spots in the countryside. But it's a wet start for Friday across Scotland, Northern Ireland, as this weather system pushes its way south-eastwards into northern England. By lunchtime, further south, there'll be a mixture of sunny spells. 1 or 2 showers starting to develop here too. In the best of the sunshine, again, temperatures mid to high teens, but on the cool side, particularly across the northwest.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's 80 years ago today, on D-Day. Tens of thousands of British troops joined Allied nations, 163,000 troops, I think it was, storming the beaches of Normandy.
That's right. They opened the path to freedom and peace in Europe, liberating France from the Germans and the Nazis.
Well, in Normandy, as she has been stoically throughout the week, is our very own Ellie Costello. Ellie, a remarkable day, and you are part of a remarkable piece of history that's unfolding before our very eyes.
A remarkable day, Andrew and Bev, and such a poignant and emotional one too. And I feel so honoured to be stood here on Gold Beach, where 25,000 British troops made their way onto these shores. And it looks beautiful today with the sun beaming down. The sea looks so flat and so calm, but that is not the way that it looked on the 6th of June 1944. These beaches below us would have been booby-trapped with mines, with bombs that had been left there by the Germans, and those brave boys and men had to get off that landing craft, wade through the waters here, and then try and navigate their way through those obstacles under enemy fire, and then shoot relentlessly at the enemy who were coming towards them. I was speaking to a veteran yesterday who said he had to shoot for 2 hours straight into German pillboxes. You can't even imagine doing that right now, but that is what his order was. He said the gun got so blisteringly hot that the paint started to melt from his gun. That is how intense that fighting was in those hours in the early morning of the 6th of June 1944. I'll just show you what the scene looks like this morning. It has been an absolute hub of activity here this morning, but it's quieting down now as the security personnel and the police have moved the crowds back. But what we can see here is active Royal Marines on this landing craft on Gold Beach. A lot more advanced than it would have been in 1944, of course, but we are seeing many serving Royal Marines and other armed forces here to pay their respects to those veterans from 1944. And it's important to remember that it's not just here on Gold Beach where many thousands lost their lives. This fighting occurred on 5 beaches in Normandy: Omaha, Utah, Juneau, Sword and Gold, where we are. So there's been commemorations all day, Andrew and Bev. There was a beautiful solo piper this morning at 6:25 precisely. That is the moment when the British troops first set foot on this sand that we can see in front of us. And it was the most beautiful moment that we will never forget, marking exactly 80 years since those boys stepped foot on this sand, and many of them paying the ultimate price with their lives for the freedoms that we so enjoy today. And they are at the heart of the commemorative events that are taking place today, and rightly so, because those veteran numbers are dwindling.
Thanks, Ellie. That's our presenter, Ellie. So you're very moved by this, aren't you? This story in the papers. Coronation Street, your part of the world, isn't it?
Well, I just think on any other day this would probably be a bigger story. But Gail Platt from Coronation Street, actress, she's 73 years old now. She's played that character for 50 years and she's leaving Coronation Street. Helen Worth is her name.
Will the cobbled streets of Weatherfield ever be the same again?
I don't know, I don't watch it. But I still think it's a significant actress stepping down.
Really is.
50 years.
Well,
exactly.
But Ken Barlow, the actor who plays the character Ken Barlow, has been in it since it started in 1961 or
Quite incredible. I'd get confused between myself and my character.
Yeah,
I think people do, yeah.
JFK was
Exactly.
I know. It's just extraordinary. And he's still in it.
Part of people's lives. Right, you will be the part of everybody's lives, won't you? From
Certainly will.
midday.
So much more to come.
So much more to come.
And
D-Day.
A rocket launch as well.
And don't forget Crybaby Gething.
Here's the weather. See you next week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. In many respects, today's going to feel quite similar to yesterday, really. We still have plenty of showers feeding in across northern parts, particularly Scotland, perhaps Northern Ireland too. Some of these will be heavy, maybe thundery, could even be a bit of sleet or snow over the highest ground of the Scottish mountains too. Meanwhile, further south, yes, some showers around, but across many parts of central England and Wales and southern parts too, it is going to stay mostly dry and there will be some decent bright and sunny spells. However, we do have some cool air across us at the moment, so in the sunshine, not feeling too bad. It is early June after all, but generally temperatures a little disappointing perhaps, especially in the north. As we go through this evening then, still watch out for some heavy showers across parts of Scotland, and like I said, there could be some rumbles of thunder. There could even be a bit of hail mixed in, which could cause some problems on the roads, and all the time some winteriness possible.